Discord. Okay, there we go. All right. Because I don't like you. Oh, so can you hear me now? Oh, is that another person? Okay. Now, while we're waiting, let's just have normal casual talk. Have you heard of the show called Rick and Morty?
Oh yeah, yeah. Trust me, we're big fans of that.
So, do you think they kept the same quality, or do you believe it became worse?
Oh, you know what? Now all of a sudden, I think it's just started picking me up.
Was it the spaghetti?
What's that? The spaghetti app? I just actually watched that one.
Ooh, be prepared to be surprised.
Okay, this is. Why is it echoing so bad? Well, I mean, we could just go. If it echoes, it echoes. I guess.
Is it me echoing or is it you?
No, it's me. Now,
It's probably because you're trying to do two things at once with the YouTube and the Zoom.
you know what I think it is. I think, to be quite honest,
And that's probably why it took out one of those to avoid the echo.
I think I know what's going on. Hold on. Let's see.
So is it better? Not at all? Okay, I was not talking. And also, let me move all my speakers away. Because you're probably hearing yourself through my speakers. Well, I am still here. How expensive was that mic? How expensive was that mic? Ooh, pricey, pricey. I see.
Okay. Now let's see if this picks up. Okay. All right. Now it's hearing me. Can I hear you say something?
One, two, three.
I just want to see what the delay will be like.
One, two, three. Test, test.
Perfect.
Perfect. Wonderful.
Nope. I think it's picking us up perfect. There's a
Hooray.
little bit of an
Progress.
echo. I'm not sure if that's from your end or my end, but it doesn't sound horrible. So I think I'll just go with it. But since I wasted another, 4 or 5 minutes doing this, when
Luckily, it's a Sunday.
yeah, this is true. And then last time I went to go cut it out, and it's one of those, when something horrible is happening, it feels like it's an eternity. But when I went back to go cut the blank audio out, I was like, oh, it's like 6, 7 minutes. I was like, it's not even going to be worth my time to do it.
So, should we do it now? Should we deal with introductions?
Sure. You want to tell me anything you want to tell me about yourself? Because I don't
I
like.
am a old. Oh, sorry about that.
What's that?
Sorry about that.
No,
Continue.
no, you're fine.
So, I'm an old forge. I'm forge. They call me Paul C. Shipper.
So,
I am a socialist who believe that capitalism is not the problem, but it's not the answer.
okay. And I can understand that. I don't think there's anything that's one particular, cause of a problem or the solution either. So that's where I think, like I spoke with the last gentleman, it turns into a thing where we get our heels dug so in on one part of something we believe in, we find it very hard to step back a little bit and listen and compromise with somebody else.
It's like a football team instead of trying to work together or negotiate.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of gotten to a point, and I did bring this up with the gentleman last time I did this. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, and it does. It's almost like there is no ability to compromise within our own selves anymore. So we can't. It's like none of us want to give an inch for anything. So we'll say something like, oh, I use this example. I used it last time with him, and it's just an example. So I don't want you to take it the wrong way or think
I
that.
shall not.
Yeah. So, but basically, it's like, okay, let's say we wanted to do, I always use the same example. So, like, let's say we're having a discussion and it's about, doing like single payer healthcare. And I'm like, I would say, okay, I'm game. Let's do it. But I think at the same time, maybe we should shut down the borders and really work on our immigration system and maybe tweak it a little bit. So if we're going to do that, we don't have a million people flooding up to use it now. And again, in my brain, with the example, it's, just an example. I would say, okay, that's a compromise. You want something, I offered something that maybe I want. Let's see if we could do something where those two ideas meet in the middle. But at some point, it's almost like the other person hears me and just goes, "No, fuck you." It's just like, wait,
Well,
whoa.
understandably, the border problem seems to be fabricated more than being an actual issue.
Yeah, well, I was only using it as an
An
example.
example, understand?
Yeah, so I didn't want to turn the discussion into that. It's just, it's one of those things because to me, I think they're both hot button topics. So, and they're two things that really, like, if you're on the opposite end of that, um, you know, ideal, it's something that really irks, like, it's almost like jabs into you a little bit. But, so I always pick those things because I feel like they're two very extreme ends of different things that,
You can be polar opposite. I understand.
yeah, exactly, polar opposites that if people could say, okay, that's a really extreme view, but then what if we said, all right, we'll take your idea, but let me trim this a little bit back.
Let's
And
find a way to negotiate.
exactly. And it's funny because we want to think that in our, system of government that that's what the two parties are, and it doesn't really feel like that at all. Like there doesn't ever feel like there's really compromise in anything. It's, to me anyway.
Now, quick question. Are we going to talk about economics or are we going to talk about governance?
Mm-mm. No, I mean my main.
Before anything else, it's just an honest question, that's all.
Yeah, no, no,
Because
no. I really didn't. I almost, for me, that's actually a really good question because if you were to look at the idea of, let's say, socialism, do you see that as just an economic system or also a form of governance?
technically it is just economics in regards to the means of production. Though, if we're going to talk about capitalism and socialism, technically capitalism is like a monarchy or hierarchy where the person at top controls everything, and socialism is basically like democracy where everyone have a say.
See, that's, and though I understand how that sort of the principle of that idea works, and it's weird because I think as capitalists, like we look at it almost opposite. So it's almost like, and I'm just giving you, my point of view. So like, I think they're very similar but very different. So it's almost like we look at capitalism and we go, oh, well, I actually have a say in this because I can decide what I want to buy and what I don't want to buy, and if I don't want to support something, I don't have to, and blah blah. So like it's the term, that term, voting with your wallet. Whereas we also look at socialism, and then we look at that like, I know the idea of it is that it's supposed to be, spread amongst the people and everybody controls a piece of everything, but we look at it and we look at its run through history where it inevitably turns into something where in the end you kind of, it's visualized that the people under that economic system or slash form of governance kind of lose control. So I mean, and I'm sure it's because something, inevitably there's always somebody that takes something a little bit too far, and then that's exactly what I think has happened with a lot of capitalism. But so like, do you think the idea that of what you just said, that the people control everything, or the people dictate, like that could actually function, or does it also need a central sort of like head of a government to keep things going?
Well, in regards to socialism, there are many kind of different types of it, but in general, it's supposed to be a democratized economic. But because it's shared doesn't mean it's functional. Let's take a form of democracy, for example. Some democracies are corrupt, and they kind of try to run like a democracy, but not really. Like if we take Russia or China, for example, they don't have fair elections, but they still kind of say they are a democracy.
Yeah, well, it's like North Korea. We have democratic elections
Oh,
all.
yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah, we have democratic elections every year, but I win in a landslide. I think a lot of us are starting to feel like almost that's starting to happen here. I mean, that's a completely different discussion. I wouldn't actually mind having that discussion with you at some point too.
Well, it is happening here.
So you feel like it is too?
It is.
Yeah.
Though it's not so much a fault of, well, our capitalistic system does have a part in it, but more it's just corruption within our government. We kind of didn't want to have kings and lords, but now we're having kings and lords again.
You know what? That's so funny because it's a good way to put that because I do see that myself. I really do. And it's funny because I'll always look back and say, technically capitalism, and it's not, I'm not saying this as a defense, technically capitalism is what got us out of the feudal ages, and now it's almost slowly creeping us back into it.
Maybe. I don't think it's so much as capitalism because capitalism at its heart is private enterprise, I mean, private industry being owned by individuals
Yep.
for money, and that's it. It has nothing to do with governance. However, as we start to have our government work, it tries to lean towards capitalism to the point where sometimes people can buy senators and congresspeople. And that's where the issue is.
I mean, I honestly, I mean, personally, I feel like that could happen under any.
Or it can happen under any system, whether it's socialism or capitalist system.
Yeah.
But that is what's happening at the moment, that corruption. And that's kind of separate from economics. It does tie into it, but it's its own issue. I
Yeah.
will say that if our current system just took care of people, we would not have people being socialists because they were taken care of and just live their lives.
See, I always, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cough. I'm still getting over a bug. See, I always hear that personally, like if we took care of people, but then at the same point, I feel like there's inevitably, even in a system like let's say I don't really know how to phrase this personally, but let's say we did open up the idea where housing was granted, healthcare was granted, and even like let's say food rations per se were granted.
We'll still have probably class system, and there might be people who might not have so much, but if they get their basic need, then being poor probably wouldn't be suffering.
So, but that's where I was going to get to. So, you kind of already cut it off at the pass there. You're inevitably still going to have people who are going to be stuck into classes. So then, let's say there's a group here who has those basic necessities, but then they see the other group over here who's maybe still doing a little better, has the basic necessities, plus they have the brand new iPhone and big TVs and a nice fancy car. Then at what point does that group on the other side decide, well, wait, why do they get all this nice stuff and we're stuck over here with just the bare essentials? I'm sorry?
Envy.
Envy. I think envy, and that, yes, envy is, I think, I think it's the grand corrupter of everything you do. Not you, but everything we try and do. I think it really is. And I actually do believe that that's what, personally to me, like I have this phrase that I like to say about capitalism when people say like capitalism has failed us. And it's a problem.
That's so weird when people say that.
What's that?
That's so weird when people say that capitalism failed us. I feel like they're just saying that as a fight back against the notion that capitalism is the only answer.
I could kind of see that too, but I think more than likely too. When I discuss this, I'm usually, excuse me, dealing with younger people, and you yourself. You sound like a fairly. I don't like using the term educated. I really don't. I think it's.
I'm a student. I got my graduate in English writing, and I'm old for
it. Well, that's the thing. I would say you're an experienced person. I never like to use the term educated because I think it's
get bad connotations.
It does have bad connotations because when somebody says they're educated to me and one of my friends have this discussion all the time. We agree on it and we laugh about it. Is that somebody can go get a master's in I don't know.
Because you're
Well,
educated, you still be stupid as shit.
and still be stupid as shit. But you can have an auto mechanic. But even let's just say they are an intelligent person. Now,
I'm not
does
intelligent. I just know some things, and that's it.
yeah. So, but does that make because they went and got a degree? Does that make them more educated than say somebody who went through trade school and learned a trade and they became educated in that? So
It's just a
I
different
don't.
kind of intelligence.
What's that?
It's just a different kind of
Different
intelligence,
kind of
more traded.
intelligence. But you sound like a logical person. And you sound like an experienced person. So that's why. But when I'm usually talking about this topic, and I actually recently was involved in something where I talked with a lot of people about this personally, and most of them were very, I would say, illogical,
Naive.
naive, very naive. That's a very good word to put it. And most of them were very young. And I don't feel like they had a lot of world experience to understand it. And so I tell people all the time, I don't feel like capitalism has failed. I feel consumerism has failed. I feel like we've all given in to these envious things. And it's like we all want to have the new fancy thing. None of us want to be that person who doesn't have this and doesn't. Me,
I,
I don't care. I just told you I bought this mic for $25 on clearance. Like that's the kind of person I am. Well, I'll make it work. That's how I was raised.
can I raise a idea?
Yeah.
I don't think consumerism is also a problem. If people are able to buy things, then the world continue to work round.
Yeah.
I think it's incorrect to say it's capitalism or consumerism. It just governs when it comes right down to it.
Well, what I was trying to sort of expunge before was the fact that we all want to have whatever the new fancy flashy thing is. So, do you know how like there's that example where, hey, give me a Band-Aid. Well, it's not a Band-Aid. It's actually an adhesive bandage strip. Band-Aid is a brand. We've taken the idea of a brand being the commodity itself so far. We've allowed the makers of these brands to just conglomerize so many aspects of our life. So we weren't really conscious consumers for a very long time. So, excuse me. So me and you are both old farts. So do you remember the whole thing where it's like Wall Street is destroying Main Street?
Yes. Are you talking about around the 2000s?
I mean, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, it really started around, Walmarts and things like that
When
where they were
was
putting.
that? I'm trying to think of the time period. Because there was like some kind of big deal on Wall Street when they had people outside.
That
And
was the Occupy Wall Street movement.
thank you. I
Yes,
forgot.
that
So
was.
that
I think that was
2008, I believe, or 2010.
something around that time. Yeah. But that I thought was more, and I could be wrong, that I thought was more dealing with the idea that all these Wall Street people were like millionaires and everybody else was not. I don't know, did that have to deal with the fact that, giant Wall Street companies were putting, small mom and pop hardware stores out of business? Like the.
A little bit of that. It was also with the fact that Wall Street was able to control much of Main Street. Depending on
Okay.
how Wall Street run their money, there could be a sharp strip there or it could be destroyed. It had a little bit too much control and people suffered because of that.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, but I think we've also really allowed that to happen because we've taken the idea of the convenience, and it's almost like we want the convenience, but we don't want the negative things that come with it. So, like I say a lot to people, it's like people will scream about Bezos, owning a yacht and this and that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Bezos fan, I'm not an Amazon fan. So it's like, well, the man owns a yacht. If that bothers you, cancel your Prime. And a lot of people will be like, I don't want to do that. So that's where I get to when I'm saying like we as consumers have sort of given up the idea that we actually have control. It's almost along that same, going back to the government, that same thing where we used to say the government works for us, but now it's we work for the government kind of thing.
I think that's a false equation.
Okay.
I'm trying to find out where to go with that because Mr. Bezos owning a lot, that's not such a big deal. However, how he's able to get that extra money is because the people that work for him help them get a lot of money, but they don't get to share in those profits.
And I do understand that. I do understand that rationale too. I really do. The the thing is though is again we have the ability to turn around and say like I don't like the way you treat your employees. I'm not gonna do business with you. And then we open up the avenue for competition. I think we've lost competition when it comes to capitalism. I think I'm also pulling you a little too far over on the other side.
Don't worry about that.
Well, I'm
I
just
just,
detracting from the actual conversation I think we were supposed to be
well, we're
having.
having something interesting right now, and being interested in having something new to talk about is better than being bored.
Yes,
So
that's a very good point.
when talking about socialists, if someone say that they're a socialist, it just means they're open to the idea. Besides that, nothing else is going to happen from that.
No,
It's
it,
not big. It's not a big movement. It's not a big plan. It's just being open to something that we was told was bad a couple hundred years ago.
yeah, I think the problem too with that is, and I'm guilty of it. You, excuse me, like I said, I dealt with people personally about that, and they don't come across with the idea. Well, again, I think it's they don't come across. It sounds instinctually abrasive to some people, and then when we hear it, we think, "Oh my God, you want to upend my entire life, and I'm gonna," we put that in the aspect of like I'm gonna have to work harder now for less. So
The slander and boogeyman effect. When people hear socialism, they don't know what to think about that. And the first thing is, oh no, they're changing something. Is this going to be like, what happened at Russia? I'm not sure what happened at Russia, but that shit was scary.
are you talking about
When they
Soviet
did the
Union?
big revolution and became socialist.
Oh yeah. So and I think that's where we end up we see the history of it. Now, everybody likes to also
Oh, do you want a small summary of the history?
oh yeah, please. We have 7 minutes on this meeting, so if it cancels, I,
Understood.
I'm just going to create another meeting and send you the link.
I understand. So, after the new revolution over at Russia, there was a new way of thinking. Hey, communism. But because of all these other countries that had changes, like Russia, Cuba, and such, they needed a new justification to take control. So all these new dictators said they were socialists, and they were going to get socialism to the people, even though it's mostly just a dictatorship.
Yeah, and I think that's the big fear with it with a lot of us is that we feel like it's going to turn into that we're going to end up being a CCP style situation over here or a Russia style situation or old Soviet Union I should say style over here. People are going to start showing up in the middle of the night, kidnapping you and make you disappear. Like we sort of use socialism and communism interchangeably because I think on a lot of the examples we have in the past it's sort of ventured into that area. I
So
think
and don't forget, we had a large scare about that too during the early 1900s. We were afraid of socialism because they were afraid that they might come here and turn us into a dictatorship.
yeah. Well, are you talking about well early 1900s or are we talking what was it 2030s the anti-communists the
Yeah,
McCarthy
that area.
years McCarthyism?
Yeah, actually, yes,
Yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah. What's funny is it's amazing how if you really look, I listen and watch a lot of Thomas Sowell. I don't know if you're familiar with who he is.
I am not, but I'm listening.
Yeah, look him up. He's very interesting. He's an economist, but it's so funny because you talk about McCarthy, and then I was listening to some other stuff, and then I was listening to a thing of Sowell from like the '70s, and it's almost like this. I'm not sure if it's perpetuated by coincidence or machine where it's almost like we go through this same rotation every couple of decades where it's like the socialism communism scare comes into the country.
It's a very easy way to get people to vote and ignore other things.
I could see that. I could very see that. You know, and it's a I think it's a good way for going into. Oh, geez, my camera's wobbling around. I think it's a good way that the government the government can gauge what the populace opinion is really. Oh, we'll do this again in another 20 years and see how everybody feels, and then we'll decide which way we're going to go with it. I mean, that's my foil hat talking, but
Well, I don't think our government cares what we want, to be quite fair.
no, I think they just want to make sure that we, you know, don't have a revolution here, so they'll just do whatever they feel like the majority of the people want.
Ah,
You know, that's going into a much different talk, to be honest. Like I said, that's my foil hat coming through, but
no, it's sensible.
I think you always have to have a little bit of that. No matter, you know, I don't think I think even if your side of the government, technically, like your side of the government, not yours, but anybody
I
out there
understand.
is in power, if you lie over and just lay down and think that they have the best interest of even you in mind, I think that's
You gotta be very skeptical of your government and what they
always have to be skeptical, always. And I think that's a healthy thing to do, because there's a history in even our own government of just doing weird,
crazy
crazy
shit.
shit to people. So I think the idea of that too is if we're going to go into something like a more socialist version of how we run things, I think a lot of us get scared because we feel like it's going to give the government more authority, and
Which they can't easily abuse.
they can or can't.
They can.
Oh yes, huh? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's what happened with Russia, Cuba, and all the other places.
exactly. I think it comes into play where it's that skepticism and that latent fear that it's like, you know what, I don't really want to give you more control over everything. I mean, chances are they probably have the same amount of control anyway. We just don't see it. I mean, we are seeing it, but I mean,
It's hard to tell at the moment.
it is, but it's also, if we're going to venture into that territory. I mean, everybody always, there's the two sides. There's the dichotomy of it, to where one side says, well, how are we going to pay for this? And then the other side says, well, we're going to have to tax the rich and we can close the loopholes. And then, the other side has that, well, they don't really have those loopholes and you can't really tax them. And then what happens if, like, the businesses go away? And then, so there's so much back and forth. So, I mean, it really makes you wonder, how would you keep these how would you, let's say we were just to give everybody.
How do you pay for everything?
Exactly, how do you pay for everything, and then how do you entice people to actually put in the amount of effort that would be needed to get it all done, as opposed to just being, hey, somebody else will do it. I mean, we have that problem now, and that's capitalism, where you have to work to eat and have a place, and people still don't care.
So, I kind of do have an answer for this. How
Okay.
do we pay for it all? But I don't think this is an issue about capitalism or socialism. It's just about how money works.
Mm-hmm.
So we already know that the government makes the money, correct?
Yes. Well, you mean they print the money or they make the money?
They literally make the money. They
Yeah.
print
Okay. Yep.
it. Every dollar bill is owned by the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even interchanged by anything else. Before, every bill was saying how much gold you can get back. But now we use fiat currency.
Yeah.
So the issue on how to pay for everything is almost silly because money is generally pretend.
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So it's really, how do we make sure this little system?
Oh. Meeting ended. Let me start another one. Sorry, folks. Sending a new link. I may have to just end up springing for for a subscription so this doesn't happen. Or I have to try and learn to keep these things under a certain amount of time. Nope, I think he might be popping in now. Also, this would be a good time to say what I'm drinking. I'm back on my rum kick now that it's autumn winter, and this is a delicious rum called the Lash. If you can find it anywhere.
Okay, I'm back in here.
Oh, there we go. I was just talking about my rum.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. It's my fault. I'm too cheap to pay for a subscription, so.
Starting from the top, money is basically fake. The government gets to create money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the government should just print money, but also find a way to help circulate through an economy. So if we give everyone universal basic income, but have a wealth tax, meaning that the money you don't use will get back taxed by the government, it will ensure circulation.
So, I'm sorry. I think I missed a piece of that. My fault. So you're saying you went into the idea of the universal basic income to give people the basic amount of money that they can spend to keep things to basically keep the fiat system kind of going, to keep money circulating.
Yes.
But
along with people being able to earn money, and the more money you get, the more it gets taxed to help the money circulate through the system.
So, but in the grand scheme of things, that would also rely on the idea of consumer goods, correct? So
Yes.
somebody would have to use their UBI. excuse me, I'm sorry. Use their UBI to go buy consumer goods, and then in that grant. So let's say,
Services.
I'm sorry,
Or services.
or services, yes. So I'm just gonna use the consumer goods for this,
Yes.
this idea that's gonna kind of lead into an example, that a question that hopefully you'll have an answer for. But so let's just say, like I said before, everybody wants the new nice shiny thing. And everybody goes out and spends the UBI on an iPhone, the new iPhone. So Apple is still a major conglomerate and corporation. We would just end up taxing them more to get back that UBI, correct?
Not more. It's also dealt with a wealth tax. So if they're trying to hoard money, the money would go back to the government eventually. But they could use that money to try to either get more money or pay workers more, or find a way not to lose the money through taxes.
So, but how would they pay the workers more? Because I mean, in generally,
People get racist.
what's that?
People get racist.
No. I understand that. I just couldn't formulate the thought I was trying to come up with. So generally, a company's most companies are public in the market per se, so they have investors, and then they have to make sure. Would we be eliminating that idea, because you would have to find a way to strip the company from the number one, like what's the word I'm looking for? The number one, like their main principle is to make money to give back to their investors,
For the
stakeholders, the shareholders, and so forth. So how would we end up basically? I would think that they wouldn't give the raises, because then again, that's going to take the money away from the shareholders and the stakeholders. So they're just going to figure out other ways to get around it. It's almost like we'd just be funneling basic income into these big companies too, because we can't get over ourselves enough to say, you know what, I'm going to go out and buy, this phone instead. And these are arbitrary examples, because.
Oh, yes, continue. Sorry.
No, I was just going to finish up right there to say, like, okay, I don't like the way that Apple didn't give everybody a raise, so I'm not going to buy their product anymore. Like, I don't feel like we as a society can break ourselves out of that habit. So even if you created a wealth tax, then you have to deal with the idea that they're still going to say, well, we have to pay our shareholders, we have to pay our stakeholders, we have to reinvest in the company. unless you're going to dictate. I don't foresee a way that I feel like it would just be the same thing. We would just be giving people money, and then they'd be giving it to the same sources that they are now, and we'd still be at like a catch-22.
Well, if we take, well, I do gotta say one thing. I think conscious consumerism is BS.
Mm-hmm.
If a company does something you don't like, I don't think it's really your place to say, well, I'm gonna boycott them. I think that's just people trying to make themselves feel better about a situation that they can't really stop.
I think it's become that. I do. I agree with you. I think it's really become that.
But that's just my private opinion about that.
No, I think it's a lot of people's. I think any rational person would see that and agree with you. I think we've turned the idea of being a smart and conscious consumer into I'm just going to jump on this bandwagon that everybody else is and make
It's
them.
a trend.
It's a trend. That's all it is. You know.
For stakeholders and shareholders, that's a very interesting thing because when you buy shares of a company, you only get money the moment they get bankrupt for the pieces that they have that they sell back.
Mm-hmm.
Besides that, the share gain more in money, but they don't get any money until they sell the shares. So
Yes.
that's just something that needs to change.
But that's where people get caught up with this idea of loopholes and things. I don't think they realize that most
I think that means more like tax loopholes. If you put your money here, then you don't have to pay taxes.
yes. Well, that's like keeping it in stocks. So a lot of companies will reinvest back into their own stocks and shares of the company, things like that. Like, owners of the company will just most people's wealth is from what I've
And
read.
shares.
I'm sorry?
It's in shares and liquids. Yes.
Shares. It's not in actual assets that I mean some of it's assets that you could seize, but most of it is just shares, and that's why you can't really tax shares because you haven't earned or lost anything yet. You have unrealized gains.
I think there needs to be a tax to discourage people from doing that and make it unprofitable. No, I don't believe that investors should be in control of our economy. I think that the main investors should be the people themselves, not just rich people, and
Hmm.
mostly the government.
But how would that transfer with like the government or the people? I mean, technically, the people could be
Oh, let's not
investor.
forget, the government does control the money and also the taxes.
They do, yeah, they do control the money and the taxes. But I mean, the people could technically, like anybody's able to buy stock. Now, I do believe there are some changes that need to be done within.
Oh, my mistake. I'm of the heavy opinion that stocks is a scam. I do understand that it's how people get a company up and running.
Hmm.
With the gamble being that if your company doesn't do well, then you'll be forced to sell your stuff and then give the money to the people with the stock, their money.
Wait, say that again?
Oh, I do believe that stocks is a scam and it's a gamble. When you start giving stocks and shares of a company, you're promising that the company will be worth a lot of money so those people can sell those stocks.
Yes.
But if the company goes under, then you got to repay those people the money that you owe.
Yes. Well, I don't know if that's so much personally, and I mean, my opinion, a scam more than it. I mean, it's just a gamble like anything else. It's like a lotto ticket. You go spend.
Well, okay, I was kind of loose with the word scam, but I think it's worthless.
I
But I
think
can be wrong.
no, no. I think it's a big gamble. I think it's anything. I mean, I have stocks myself, and I mean, it is But I do think there are changes. I do. Me and one of my other friends talk about it all the time. How it's a system that really does appear to be rigged more towards the people, the wealthy, than it does the regular Joe. You
But
know,
if we did have something like UBI and the money being flowed to the normal people and they get to spend money and also work to get more money, it would ensure that there's circulation within a particular economy. And if start getting money and put it back into stocks, I suppose that's okay as long as that money being used to help the company and spread the wealth around.
how? But how would you also like? Let's say there. let's say there was a UBI. That's something that interests me because I feel like that's also a scary thing to some degree. Now, I would almost say like if we were to do something like a UBI, and this is where it sort of like almost veers to me into it becomes from the idea of a basic income into just a subsidy. Because at what point, if you were to be able to take your UBI and go buy free market goods, what's to stop all of a sudden that free market, which would still technically under the system that we're discussing right now, from that corner of that market to say, well, guess what? You know, you guys, what's to stop inflation to some degree? Would we have to? So, like, if we were gonna do a UBI, to me, I think it would almost be like the idea of food stamps or housing vouchers, things like that, to where it protects the market from inflating, and you're just using. You have very select things that you can get with it. But then I think you're also pigeonholing people who get UBI. You know, then you're creating that envy as well because it's like, well, it's mine. Why can't I go use it on what we want? And it's like, but we have to protect everybody else because if everybody's going out and buying, I'm going to use the iPhone example again. If everybody's just going and spending all their money on iPhones, like, you know, what's to stop Apple from turning around and saying, well, guess what? We're going to have to jack up our, you know, we're going to jack up our prices.
Well, an easy way is just to tell them to tax wealth. So even if they jack up the price and then they would spend the money, then they have to find a way to spend that money. And for people who do get UBI, let's not put limits on what they can use it for. As long as people have money, that still help the economy. As long as you buy things.
Okay. I mean, but again, if, if they have to spend that money, I mean, that's the company. And so if you know, that's something too, I don't think I've ever gotten my grasp around personally is the idea of the wealth tax. When people talk about the wealth tax, like taxing wealth, are they talking about individuals or corporations or both?
I would think individual and corporations.
So if somebody just makes a lot of money, then it's like they're going to get, you know.
Then the percentage of the money that they keep gets taxed instead of how much money they earn. So let's say that you make $10 million a year, but you have $1 trillion. Instead of taxing the $1 billion you made, you tax the trillion, the bigger one.
So wait, say I'm sorry, I missed that. So
let's use thousands and millions. There we go. So let's say someone made a couple $100,000 a year,
okay.
and overall they got $1 million. Instead of taxing the income, the money they made that year, you tax their total wealth, the million.
So, but I think what I'm not the first time I just really couldn't hear you very well, but the second time, so they're making like $100,000 a year, but they get $1 million. But where did that differential come from?
I mean, if they had a total of $1 million.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry. So that's where I wasn't comprehending. So they made $100,000 a year, but they actually have like $1 million between assets and money and things like that. So you're going to tax them on the grand total that they have, but then you have to figure out a way to keep them from, you know, hiding it and things like. I think it becomes difficult at that point.
Or at the very most, to encourage them not to hoard their money. Because making a lot of money is not a big problem, but they do need to spend it. We do have like a situation where like the top 1% own half the wealth. If they spend the money, then the economy will survive. And it's not even about them giving the tax for it. It's just trying to force them to spend the money.
Gotcha. So whether that dictates on them buying, you know, extravagant things like a new jet or issuing out, and it's a corporation, or they're just going to issue out like bonuses to employees, things like that. You want them to just get rid of that money. I feel like there's too many ways to hide it. I feel, excuse me, sorry. I feel like too, there's, you know, how can I put this?
There are a lot of loopholes.
There are a lot of loopholes, but I think the actual idea that it would be enforced becomes tricky, because then we're looking into areas where, I mean, look at how wealthy even most of our politicians are. I think that's going to get them, like, even they're going to be like, well, I don't want to lose my money. So I think it becomes really hard to enforce.
Politicians, I do believe that if you decide to be a politician, you cannot go back into the public sector.
No, I actually 100% agree with that. Trust me. I think there's a lot of us that would. That's where I say I think even people who might be on different uh,
I think most people do agree with that.
yeah, and I think there's a lot that a lot of people really do agree on if they just take the time to actually sit down and conversate instead of scream. You know,
Simple little tiny things like, you know what? When talking to if a kid lies to you in school, you get to punish them or give them detention.
hmm
Maybe all politicians shouldn't be allowed to lie to us. Maybe everything they say need to be like as if they lie to us, it's a form of perjury to the people.
well, I mean, technically that kind of is, but I don't think it ever really gets enforced. How many times we actually see politicians getting away with anything more than a slap on the wrist? Um,
Now, if they lie in court, I mean, they if they lie in court when they're what's that word?
Perjury,
I mean, not perjury. When they are on the stand and they have to tell the truth, they don't
testimony.
lie. But in the commercial or the advertisement, then they lie. Maybe we should just treat all the advertisement like they're on trial.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean it's tough. I mean, it's so tough to I think enforce things like that.
Or it's not that hard to enforce it. We could just fact check what they say.
Sorry, I'm. Oh,
And if they lie, they could either be removed from office for lying or go to jail.
mm. Yeah, no, I mean, in a perfect world, um, going back, you know
Oh,
what?
my
Let me.
mistake. I just meant that that's one of the things that people could agree with.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. You know what? I'm sorry. I just have to. You know what? I'm gonna have to actually call it in a minute, but I wanted to actually go into the question that kind of started this and brought this together was
Oh yes, why don't socialists like just go to one area and try their ideas there, where they'll be able to have major control of the lower area?
yeah, and I think the way I put that online, you can dictate, you can use all the grammar and punctuation and things you like. People are going to hear it the way they want to hear it. And when I posted it, I did genuinely mean it as like a question, like has anybody really thought about doing that? Because like you said, the McCarthy area, and then I was talking about, after that, and it seems to crop up, and it seems like we're in that cycle again now, where it's like that socialism, communism, like push. Now, whether that's a belief, like a real belief, and that it could happen, or it's just,
It can happen, but it takes a lot and a lot of organization. First, the
so
people. Oh yes,
no, 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 no. I just wanted to have your. So it does. It takes a lot of organization, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like it makes more sense to me to where I don't understand why. Like when I talk to the people, it's almost like they feel like it has to be a countrywide thing right off the bat. Where I'm a trickle person, like I'm one of those people that, like I said, I bought this mic on sale. If I like it and it works well for me, I'll spend a little more. This mic behind me right here, after years, I just finally splurged on this. I was using garbage mics for, recording with me and my drummer and stuff like that. But so it's like, why not start small and then work your way up? And what like to me, I think it would make a lot more sense where instead of like kicking and screaming would be to not you. That's not what I'm
I
not.
understand. I understand. Don't
Yeah,
worry
yeah.
about that.
I don't want you to take that personally. But instead of like being almost like turning it into this animostic thing between two groups where it's like we feel like we're all butting heads, to say like, hey, you know what? Why don't we go try this over here instead? And it almost seems like too that, well, you know what? Let's go there. Like, what really is it? The idea of the money it would take, or the organization to have everybody go in one area, or
Well, let's be realistic. We are just talking to people who are online to argue, so that's part of it.
hmm, yeah,
Second, it would take a lot of work, and also people would have to agree. Not everyone believe in the exact same version of socialism. So
hmm,
they got to find a lot of people and they have to agree on something and then decide to move to that area and do that thing. Or at most, that thing need to start where people can get to go to it. One small example would be a little place in Florida. People who hate socialism altogether. However, a small town developed their own city store where they buy product and get things for the people. In a way, that's socialism, even though they don't call it socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by accident.
So you think it's just the different versions and ideas of socialism that people have that keep them
For making the attempt, yes.
from making an attempt. So wouldn't it? I mean, I guess that leans towards what we started with this whole conversation with is, the idea of compromise. Being able to give your opinion or your idea and then have somebody say, okay, well, really it does become a game of poker. I'll see that and I'll raise you this.
And the sad thing is, it's not people compromising with capitalists, it's socialists compromising with themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, I can see how that would be a problem. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, maybe you just, sorry, but I'm actually going to have to end up calling it a night. That I wish we talked more about that. Maybe we could do it again sometime. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Socialism, the idea of, the different pockets and facets of it that maybe can't get along. But in that case, maybe it's like, you go to...
Let's not forget, not everyone has the exact same version of socialism. And when someone said they're a socialist, it just means that they're open to the idea.
Yeah.
It's like being bi-curious. They're socialists curious.
Socialist curious. Yeah, so I mean, I get that. That's actually probably the best explanation and reasoning that anybody's ever given me about that. But hey, if that's the case, you go to a state and then you each pick cities and then work from there. I guess I don't know. Nobody has the answer.
California would not be a good fit. That's its own issue.
So, but all right, sir, or. Well, I don't know. You said you can to use this name right here. This is not your actual, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Shipper, but I'm gonna actually have to call a night myself. I do appreciate.
Have a wonderful evening.
Yes, no, you too. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully, you do it again sometime. Stay in touch with me. And I mean, I don't know if you have any personal thing. I mean, I guess it would be probably too personal. I meant to ask the last guy anything that you want to promote or put out there.
No. I learned that social networking sucks.
Yep, it really does.
I was during the age of live journal, and I learned my lesson.
Yeah, I try and stay away from all that stuff. So, but all right, my friend. I hope you have a very good night and the rest of the weekend, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Bye.
Have a good night.